Righty. So in our last collector spotlight, which was a few weeks ago, I shared the story of Akira Noguchi, who was a Japanese bryologist who collected and identified a lot of specimens in our collection. So today I thought I'd follow up with another collector from Japan, this time Mizutani, which you may have seen. So the specimen here was collected by him along with Z. Iwatsuki, who is another very well-known name in the Tennessee collection. It was collected in May of 1959 near Heka on this is the Osumi Peninsula in Kagoshima Prefecture. So you may remember that Japan is divided into 47 prefectures, and Kagoshima is actually this one here down at the very bottom. The Osumi Peninsula that's mentioned in the locality is this peninsula right here. I did think it was kind of interesting. Right here, you'll see this is actually a volcano called Sakurajima or Cherry Blossom Island. And it was an island until 1914 when the lava flow from an eruption from that volcano connected it to the Osumi Peninsula. This is actually a picture of that eruption that was taken, and it is today Japan's most active volcano, which I thought was kind of an interesting side note. So our specimen was identified as Drepanolegionea foliicola. It's a liverwort. And in this case, it was found growing on the leaves of evergreens. So you can see our little liverwort here. And I found a picture of it, and it's right here, growing in the wild, also on a leaf. And when we looked in the portal for other specimens, there was a little bit of a pattern. So not all were on leaves. There were a few that were listed as growing on trunk bases, but does appear to be very commonly growing on the leaves of other plants. And the species name foliicola actually means growing on leaves. So Mizutani was Masami Mizutani. So he was a Japanese bryologist born in 1930 in Tokyo City, which is in the Tokyo Metropolis Prefecture. His father was an architect for the South Manchuria Railway Company. So he actually spent much of his childhood in China. He lived from the age of 5 to 16 in the Liaoning province, which at that time was part of the Empire of Greater Manchuria, which was nominally its own country, but was functionally controlled by Japan. In 1946, he returned to Japan and attended the Hamamatsu #1 junior high school, which appears to be equivalent to kind of our high school. And he graduated the following year at the age of 17. And that was actually the last of his kind of formal education in schools. He had a few different jobs after graduation, ended up working as a workman in a car factory in Osaka City. But while he was there, he joined a study group focused on ferns and mosses. And through that group, he met Dr. Matoji Tagawa, who was a fern taxonomist at Kyoto University. And he introduced Mizutani to Dr. Shinsuke Hattori, who was the founder of the Hattori Botanical Lab and who would mentor him in his studies. So just a little bit of a background, the Hattori Botanical Laboratory is a bryological and lichenological research center in the small town of Nichinan in the Miyazaki Prefecture. It was founded in 1946 by Dr. Hattori and continues to be a hub of cryptogamic research today. So in 1956, Mizutani began working in bryology at the Hattori Botanical Lab under the mentorship of Dr. Hattori. He specialized in the taxonomy of liverworts and started working on taxa from southern Japan, including the 2 liverwort families that you see here. He described a new subgenus, Lobata ricardia, which later became its own genus. But by the end of the 1950s, he began to work on the family Legionnaceae. So this large and difficult family has over 1,600 species. It includes almost a quarter of all liverworts, including our specimen. And at that time, the family is described as being in a state of chaos. There were hundreds of species in the most recent compendium of liverwort taxa, but many were questionable, likely in the wrong genus, and it really needed to be completely reviewed and revised. And so Mizutani would spend the rest of his life and career working on that. becoming a world authority on the family. He wrote a long series of papers on Leguniaceae from several regions in Asia and revised type specimens from earlier sources. He newly defined and illustrated hundreds of species, made improvements to existing genera, and divided the family into two broad subfamilies. Importantly, he defined and illustrated, he helped to define new and better criteria to organize the taxa within the family, and many of his designations were supported later by molecular studies. In 1961, he published his dissertation, A Revision of Japanese Leguniaceae. He submitted that to Tohoku University and was subsequently granted a doctorate in 1962. And he was the first person to receive that degree in plant sciences without attending university, which is pretty impressive. So he became an accepted expert on Asian Leguniaceae and was also known for his creative and original hypotheses about plant anatomy and taxonomy. One of his most daring ideas dealt with the genus Takakia. So this strange liverwort was first collected and described from the Himalayas in 1861 by William Mitten as a new species in the genus Lepidosea. However, in the 1950s, the botanist Dr. N. Takaki found similar plants in Japan, and it was renamed in his honor in its own genus called Takakia in 1958. But Mizutani was one of the first ones to propose that it might not even be a liverwort. He published several Japanese language papers in the 60s and 70s, citing structures that were more characteristic of mosses. But it wasn't until 1990, so 20 years later, that specimens that had sporophytes, so the reproductive structures of a moss, they were found by D.K. Smith in the Aleutian Islands, confirming that Mizutani was right. So interestingly, D.K. Smith was a former curator here at the Tennessee Herbarium, and we actually have his specimens of Takakia from the Aleutian Islands currently in our backlog. So Dr. Budke is working through the specimens to get them incorporated into our collection, but I thought it was a very small world, obviously. So during his career, Mizutani described and revised over 200 taxon names, all the way from subgenus to suborder, mostly in that Leguniaceae family. Over 60 years, he published more than 200 papers, including 143 on liverworts. He wrote on many topics, including taxonomy and floristics. He created identification manuals and checklists. He was praised for his seemingly simple but sophisticated illustrations, which helped to highlight important features. In 1972, along with Zenosuke Iwatsuki, he published the first modern illustrated bryophyte book in Japan, titled Colored Illustrations of Bryophytes of Japan, which included 821 species and helped to increase interest in bryophytes in that country. He contributed to several Japanese exocati sets, including the Sepaticae Japonicae, so Japanese liverworts, which he co-edited. So Mizutani did not directly supervise students, but he was a helpful resource to bryologists in training. He, quote, kindly and logically guided them onto the right path with clear instructions. And he passed away in 2020 at the age of 90, so pretty recently. So there were many taxa that were named in his honor, including Mizutania ricardioides, which is a rare liverwort that he collected in Malaysia. Specimen-wise, there are over 2,500 from Mizutani in the Bryophyte portal. Lots of those are liverworts, obviously, but also mosses. There were 12 in the lichen portal, 28 in vascular symbiota, and I found just over 1,000 in GBIF. And also, too, he did identify a lot of our specimens, too. So his name is probably in the determiner under many more than that. So that is Masami Mizutani, another interesting Japanese bryologist who is well represented in our herbarium. So thank you for listening.